On the Love and Hip Hop Atlanta set, it was meant to be just another night. Fans were waiting for the next exciting episode with the music blaring and the cameras rolling, but what happened behind the scenes was one of the most startling, breathtaking, and very personal moments in the history of reality television. Fans of Jim Jones and Chrissy Lampkin, whom they had followed for years, were deeply shaken by a betrayal. According to sources, the night started out like any other as they both got ready for the performance, practicing their lines and chatting with their crew. However, behind the surface, tension had been rising for months due to minor disagreements that had not been settled. Silently brewing are unspoken annoyances and the ongoing pressure of celebrity. Then everything went haywire. According to reports, a reliable person in Jim's personal circle released private video, documenting the unadulterated, uncut moments of Jim's furious response and Chrissy's emotional collapse. What started off as a private dispute turned into a public spectacle, leaving Chrissy and Jim feeling furious, exposed, and deceived. The production crew, their team, and, above all, their relationship were all rocked by the leak. Fans at home were in disbelief as they watched the leaked video over and over again, attempting to put together what caused this unheard-of breakdown. The leak was not the only issue for Jim and Chrissy. It was about trust, loyalty, and realizing that even those closest to them may suddenly turn on them. Their relationship, their trust, and their profession would all be irrevocably altered by this night. Backstage events would provide the conditions for drama, conflict. Fans would never forget this emotional reckoning. The mood backstage that fateful night was explosive, but not in a good way. Typically, there was a lot of excitement, laughing, and the typical stress of reality TV production on the set of Love and Hip Hop Atlanta. However, tonight was distinct. There was a hanging item, a mixture of excitement, anxiety, and an unseen tempest simmering under the surface. It was felt by everyone on the set. Chrissy Lampkin and Jim Jones were on edge. Jim was the first to arrive. His typical assured gait was swapped out with a measured, even circumspect pace. His jaw was taut, exposing the tension that was boiling behind it, and his hood was drawn down, sunglasses protecting his eyes. He passed the cameras and crew with careful, even mechanical motions. One tone. Sensing the increased tension, one of his closest pals remained nearby. He was aware that a single inappropriate phrase or gesture may start a fire that would be impossible to put out. Soon later, Chrissy showed there, passing the cameras with her customary grace. However, the rigidity in she completely avoided making eye contact with Jim, and her shoulders showed the emotional weight she bore. She walked down the corridor to her dressing room, her eyes on her phone. The production crew relocated as soon as possible to avoid any contact. The tension had been growing for weeks, maybe months, and it was known that the couple's energy was unstable and erratic. Once little arguments suddenly had weight, made worse by the stress of being videotaped all the time. A few remarks, unspoken annoyances, and little slights had all added up, and they were on the verge of losing it tonight. Silently, almost subtly, it started. A casual comment made by one of Jim's long-standing crew members seemed innocuous, but the timing was crucial. Chrissy, who was already emotionally spent, lost it. "Do you find that amusing?" With a shaky yet strong voice that pierced through the background noise of the busy set, she requested. The remark seemed like the last straw, even though it was insignificant in the context. Jim approached her with his hands up, trying to defuse the situation, but Chrissy refused to back down. The catalyst that would unleash the storm that everyone backstage had been sensing. "Refrain from interfering," she stated sternly. "You are not the focus of this. Respect is at issue here." For the first time in weeks, she had a ferocious expression in her eyes. The wall between them seemed to have finally broken. The dispute quickly became heated. Fueled by a mixture of pain, fury, and long-suppressed irritation, Chrissy's voice soared. "I'm constantly treated disrespectfully by them. Every time you pick them over me," she yelled. Her statements were scathing and piercing. Jim was taken by surprise and responded defensively. "They are not my preference over you. I just cannot exert control over everyone." His tone had a mixture of desperation and frustration. Unsure whether to step in or avoid the gunfire, his team watched in silence. This was more than a dispute. Years of unresolved tension were exposed during the encounter. Tone, aware of the worsening circumstances, intervened with caution. "Hey everyone, you must relax." In his words, "Not here, not now." However, Chrissy turned against him, glaring at him. And steadfast. "You're contributing to the issue, so don't advise me to relax." The normally unbreakable equilibrium between Chrissy and Jim had been upset. Chrissy stormed, emotionally raw and enraged. The sound of her heels reverberated down the corridor as she headed into her dressing room. Jim trailed a few paces behind, mumbling to himself, his expression a mask of bewilderment and rage. Every moment was being recorded by rolling cameras. However, the team was unprepared for the severity of what was happening. Voices became even more heated inside the changing room. Chrissy said that Jim often put his staff above. Jim defended his devotion to those who had supported him through thick and thin, while they defended their connection. Words spilled forth that had been suppressed for years. Unadulterated and unrefined. Manufacturing. The emotion in the room was evident despite the staff's best efforts to mediate. According to crew workers, it was the most heated dispute they had ever seen between the two. Jim's jaw was tense, his shoulders were set, and his words were cutting, all signs of irritation. Anguish for Chrissy was equally apparent. Her voice trembled with a mixture of pain and rage, and tears filled her eyes. Chrissy's emotions got the better of her at one point. Everyone was taken aback when she started crying, and the sound reverberated throughout the dressing room. Jim froze for a second. I wasn't sure whether I should back off or console her. They had handled private arguments and public criticism for years, with a degree of poise that suddenly seemed unachievable. You always put everyone first, Jim. Else first, Chrissy yelled in between tears. You allowed them to treat me disrespectfully. You want me to just go on after allowing them to speak down to me. Jim's eyes narrowed, a mixture of annoyance and an increasing feeling of powerlessness. Chrissy, I can't control everyone. I am unable to. I've waited. It's not easy, but I've tried. Tone's calm, deep voice attempted to step in once again. Let's back off a little. This is not the time to do it. Quatiz's piercing, accusing look sliced straight through him. You have no right to advise me to back down. You contribute to the occurrence of this. As the impact of her words set in, the room became quiet. Jim stroked his temples in an attempt to calm himself, but his face was etched with pain and fury. Chrissy, I hope this doesn't become into worse, he said in a strained tone. Chrissy shot back. I don't want to fight like this. So why, Jim, do we always getting here? Why must there always be a fight? I'm tired. I can't do this any longer. Everyone in attendance was emotionally spent as the dispute continued for hours. Crew members captured snippets of the altercation in silence, well aware that the public would analyze this unvarnished and unprocessed sight for weeks to come. The cameras did not record only a disagreement, but the breakup of a partnership. The clash of personal vulnerability, devotion, trust, and celebrity. After a while, Chrissy turned and raced out of the room, leaving Jim motionless for a time. His crew hurried after him, attempting to soothe him, but the night's emotional toll was clear. The normally calm rapper was clearly agitated, his shoulders tense, his eyes squinted, and his mouth clenched. The vibe had irrevocably changed, despite the production team's best efforts to reorganize the set and go on shooting. Backstage, everyone knew that this was more than just another quarrel. It was a pivotal moment, a disclosure of long-standing problems that Chrissy and Jim were unable to overlook. By night's end, Chrissy and Jim had each gone to their own places, mentally absorbing what had happened while physically being apart. Only a fragment of what transpired was recorded in the leaked video that would subsequently go viral online. However, even that little excerpt showed enough to shake the fan base to its core. There was an explosion of analysis, judgment, and conjecture on social media. Under extreme strain, each viewer pieces together the mechanics of a relationship. By the end of the night, one thing was certain. The devotion, trust, and emotional bond had been put to the ultimate test between Jim and Chrissy. A apparently routine night on the set turned into a turning point, and a point of no return that would impact their appearance on the program, their jobs, and the course of their relationship. For weeks, months, and perhaps years to come, the effects of that night would be felt. Both of them would never forget the tempest that was caused by the unadulterated, unfiltered emotions, the public revelation of personal conflicts, and the difficulties of negotiating trust and treachery in the celebrity world. The true story, balance between private and public life, was being told behind the cameras. When the set was, it was clear that this night would go down in history as the night when Jim Jones and Chrissy's lives took a drastic turn when the place became deserted and the lights went out. Lampkin, an evening filled with treachery, heartache, and a pivotal moment that would influence how their relationship and the reality TV industry developed in the future. The Love and Hip Hop Atlanta set was tight the day after that dramatic night, almost oppressive. Knowing that the emotional tempest between Jim Jones and Chrissy Lampkin hadn't ended, everyone backstage moved gingerly as the air felt thicker than normal. Leaked videos had already alerted fans to what had transpired, and social media was ablaze with conjecture as people analyzed every move, phrase, and face expression. The couple was under tremendous pressure to remain composed while shooting, since their private problems were suddenly made public. Jim showed up. First, a stiff, somewhat mechanical manner. His hood was up, and his eyes were protected by sunglasses, but his shoulders and jaw were tense. Revealed the internal conflict he was experiencing. His men trailed closely behind, knowing that any mistake may lead to another altercation. Tone remained at his side, closely monitoring Jim and the rest of the group. Chrissy came in later, aware that the delicate equilibrium may break at any time. The fatigue from the previous night was visible, and her normally composed and polished look was a little shaky, but she kept her cool as she moved about the set and avoided making eye contact with Jim. Production workers hurried to put space between them. Knowing that a little conversation may spark a heated debate from yesterday, Chrissy withdrew to her dressing room to concentrate on practicing her lines and getting ready for the photo session. Even though Chrissy's feelings from the previous evening were still very much present, the leaked video had already gone viral online, revealing her emotional collapse and Jim's furious reaction. Fans were analyzing the video, arguing about who was at blame, and making assumptions about how their relationship was going. Although just a small portion of the night's events were released, insiders on set said that the tape caught unadulterated, real emotions, and was sufficient to expose long-hidden flaws. Before production resumed, producers determined that the problem needed to be addressed. With the cameras off, they set up a private meeting with Jim and Chrissy to make an effort to mediate and reduce the rising tension. Jim took the first seat, reclining back with his arms folded and his mouth clenched. His normally self-assured demeanor gave way to a combination of irritation and fatigue. Chrissy showed up a little while after, calm on the exterior but clearly nervous. Her hands were firmly clutched in her lap. The producers were careful in their speech. "We must choose our course of action. Fans are responding to the video that has been released. You may choose. Deal with it in private or on camera, but it can't interfere with today's filming." Chrissy's. The quiet was broken by a calm but forceful voice. Cameras are not the issue. It's about limits, respect, and years of unsolved problems. The cameras were not involved in that altercation. It took place due to genuine emotions and annoyance that have been disregarded for too long. At last, Jim's voice was low but full of passion. "I am aware that I didn't manage it appropriately, but I also didn't anticipate it being public. It was not intended for anybody to see, though there was a lot of tension in the room." They both realized that what had happened the night before was more than just a brawl. They exposed long-standing rifts in their relationship. Loyalty had been questioned and trust had been shattered. Knowing that this altercation would determine the course of the remainder of the shooting day, the crew members watched in silence. Filming started around mid-morning, although the atmosphere was quite different. Each and every the exchange between Chrissy and Jim was intense. Every look was laden with unsaid messages. Even informal conversations were tense, and the team worked carefully to prevent anything that may cause another outburst. Chrissy confided in a close buddy on site at one time. Silently, she whispered, "I can't keep feeling invisible, like my feelings don't matter. He is devoted to all other people. However, I'm expected to simply accept it and go on when it comes to me." Her companion nodded, understanding the public stakes while giving support. When they responded, "You're right to feel that way. However, you also need to think about how supporters would respond if the situation worsens once again." Jim, meantime, had a private meeting with his colleagues to discuss the leaked video. His voice was strained as he added, "I don't know who did it. However, someone violated the team's confidence." As crew members exchanged anxious looks, tensions increased. "We can't have that." There was a sense of mistrust throughout the room, but nobody wanted to be blamed. Jim's typically composed manner has been substituted with a restrained fury, a mixture of pain and rage. Jim and Chrissy made an effort to act professionally throughout the day, but the emotional fallout from the previous evening hung on. It was difficult to remain composed throughout every scene and every sentence. The parts of the debate had previously been viewed by the public. Their every action was scrutinized, examined, and evaluated. The tension increased during the afternoon. Aware of the atmosphere, Tone walked stealthily up to Jim. "Yo, Jim," he replied. "I think we should talk before it blows up again." Jim nodded, feeling trapped but grateful for the intervention. He was aware that dealing with the fundamental problems was inevitable, but doing so in public would only add to the drama. Eventually, production requested that Jim and Chrissy have a private mediation session. The cameras were not in use, however, the stakes were tremendous. Jim was the first to speak, his tone calm yet tense. "I can't deny what occurred, but I also don't want another altercation like the one from last night." Chrissy responded coolly but firmly, "I'm not expecting you to overlook it. All I want is recognition and respect." Jim breathed out, "Loyalty that includes me, not just everyone else in your circle." The burden of the night before weighing heavily on him. "You're correct. Rather of listening, I became defensive. I must perform better." Chrissy became a little softer, but she remained vigilant. "Listening alone is not enough. It's about demonstrating that even in high-stress situations, my emotions are important." The conversation was drawn out and extremely charged, exhausting and challenging. However, it was a beginning. They both understood that restoring trust would need patience and constant work. There was no resolution. However, it was the first step toward recognizing the more profound problems that had brought about the breakdown. A surprise discovery later rocked the stage even more. Tone walked stealthily up to Jim, using fresh data. "I am aware of the source of the video release. Neither I nor anybody else was involved. As you suspected, Darnell was the one. He said that no one would be able to identify him and that he needed money." Jim's response was quick and forceful. "Are you serious, Darnell?" The treachery was severe. For years, Jim's tight group had included Darnell, someone who had collaborated on studio sessions, milestones, and everything he held dear, was shaken by the idea that someone he trusted so much might betray him for financial gain. The encounter with Darnell came quickly. Jim's loud voice reverberated along the corridor as he demanded answers immediately. Although security stepped in to stop the situation from becoming worse, the emotional toll was evident. It was a difficult lesson to learn that trust might be betrayed from inside, and he and Chrissy would need time to think. From a distance, Chrissy could see how deeply Jim was frustrated. The dispute wasn't just about her emotions for once. Within their inner group, it was about trust, loyalty, and treachery. She was aware of how serious the issue was and how it would affect their relationship and professions. By in the evening, Jim and Chrissy retired to their own rooms and thought over the day. Although they were geographically apart, their minds were connected, absorbing the emotional disarray, the treachery, and the public revelation of their personal hardships. Even though the leaked video was partly fixed, it served as a continual reminder that errors are magnified by celebrity. When there are cameras around, feelings are never private and trust may be brittle. Both Jim and Chrissy were aware that the path ahead would call for endurance, open communication, and a dedication to restoring not just their relationship, but also the broken trust. As darkness fell, the set became quieter, but the emotional effect persisted. Friends, producers, and crew members realized that this was no ordinary event from reality TV. It was a pivotal night that put Jim and Chrissy's relationship's sturdiness, fortitude, and capacity to handle betrayal in a world where the moment is recorded, examined, evaluated, and assessed. The message was evident by the time the lights went down and the filming was over. Emotions had been exposed, allegiance had been called into question, and trust had been put to the test. For Chrissy and Jim, the difficulty was repairing their relationship internally in the face of private treachery and public criticism. Even though the mayhem of the night was ended, the effects would last for weeks, months, and even years. The chemistry between Jim and Chrissy